Welcome to This Week with EdSurge for the week of August 19th. I'm Ira Apfel, Editorial Director here at EdSurge. What if the smartest move with AI isn't a better rule? It's a better question asked at the very start, not the end. Our first guest says the fix isn't a better detector, it's a better assignment built before a student ever opens a chatbot. Our second guest says the fix isn't a better contract. It's a clear look at the electricity bill and the invoice before a district signs anything. Let's start with Michael Hernandez, who taught himself to code with AI so that he could build a free tool that catches a weak assignment before students ever get the chance to cheat on it. Plagiarism checkers, lockdown browsers, stricter rules. Teachers have tried all of it, and AI keeps getting used anyway. Michael Hernandez saw where all of this was heading and decided the problem wasn't the students, it was the assignments. He'd spent years teaching other educators how to redesign their own assignments through his book, his workshops, and his conference sessions. But he could only sit with so many teachers at a time. So he decided to build something that could do it for him. One problem, Michael hadn't written a line of programming code since high school. That's when he discovered vibe coding, describing what he wanted in plain language and letting AI build it. The result is the Cheat Vulnerability Index, a free tool that scans an assignment and flags exactly where it's exposed to cheating. Michael's recent piece for EdSurge walks through what he's learned while building it and the 3 traits he now believes every uncheatable assignment needs. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's start with your article, which was a really, really strong piece, and I highly recommend people check it out at edsurge.com. You write that vibe coding is a lot like teaching. Deep expertise, clear instructions, a definition of what quote-unquote good looks like. What made you draw that connection?
So it was only after I did the process and I was having a conversation with a colleague about how I did it, and it struck me that there are so many parallels to creating code to achieve an outcome to what it means to design a lesson plan or a unit plan. So, for example, you have to be very, very specific with a set of instructions to tell this machine what to do. I have what are called skills in Cloud Code, these little agents that have specialties. And so what you have to do is give them pre-reading training. So, for example, it would read my book and read the transcript of my course to understand the background knowledge, right? And then you'd have to set out a set of goals and say, this is what we're here to do overall, and your specific role is this. And then you have to outline step by step how to proceed. And then at each of those steps, you have to kind of outline detail, hey, this is what counts as good. And I'm going to have a rubric designed for you. So when you do some work, it needs to score 7 or higher in order for you to move on. Otherwise, you go back and redo the work. It really struck me that this is actually what we do in the classroom all the time.
Well, let's walk through your tool that you designed. Again, it's free for anybody to use. Let's say I'm a teacher and I come to you and I say, Michael, I want to use it. I teach middle school math. How would I use it to design either homework or an actual quiz or a test and make it work for me to make it more cheat-proof?
So at this point, it's a diagnostic of an existing assignment that you already have. So I was thinking about this project and I was asking some friends, some teacher friends, what they would like to see in this product. What features would they like to have? And one of them was like, you know what, it'd be really great if you could take an existing assignment and kind of see how it fares, right? So the way it works is you go to my website, michaelhernandez.net, and you go to Cheat Vulnerability Index, and you upload an assignment, it could be a PDF or a Word document, and it will take, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds, and it will generate a full report pinpointing the areas of strengths and weaknesses as they relate to cheating and vulnerability to cheating. And it will give you suggestions for how to make those changes, including pointing out which chapter in the book will answer that question or solve that problem for you, or which module in the course will solve that problem for you. You get a customized, personalized set of feedback on it. And then it's up to you from there to kind of make that happen. And I can't spell out every single step because you have specific goals or standards in your school or learning environment, but it will give you the direction of the next steps that you can take.
I'm sure you probably had your teacher friends use it. What was their reaction, particularly as you iterated the cheat vulnerability index and it got better and more precise? What did they say? And did you see any kind of patterns of where they started to kind of make changes to their assignments and assessments?
Yeah, so this is a fairly new tool. It's only like maybe a couple of weeks old at this point, but the feedback has been pretty great, pretty strong. I think a lot of people are surprised at like how it helps them. They're like, "This is very useful because it helps me recognize some weaknesses." Some of the feedback I got was like, "Oh, I never considered this as a criteria for how to make this less vulnerable to cheating." And so, just even in the criteria alone, it kind of is a good reminder, a call out of some things to look for. And so it's nice to have an outside, fresh perspective of thinking of some other ways we might consider what counts as evidence of learning, what counts as assessment, what should we be assessing, and what does it mean to cheat? I mean, that's a huge underlying question to begin with. Like, is collaboration cheating? Is using AI cheating? It's really great in helping people see what's possible and bringing awareness to what's going on with their assignments. And I ran several of my assignments through, and I was actually surprised. I didn't score as high as I thought I would, even on my own assignments and assessments. So I'm like, oh yeah, I should have been stronger with that.
One of the things that struck me about your article was that it could have just been about, hey, here's my free, uh, you know, um, tool, go use it and live long and prosper. But you actually draw it to a larger points that you want to make about assignments and assessments. And you talk about three traits that every assignment should have. And so let's talk about those. First of all, you start with originality. What separates an assignment students can't just copy or outsource to AI from the one that they can? Why is originality so important?
Talking about my book, Storytelling with Purpose, Digital Projects to Ignite Student Curiosity. It's a handbook about how to create and grade authentic assignments with your students. And there was a chapter in that book on how to use multimedia research projects as a form of assessment. And it turns out they're an uncheatable form of assessment. And the three pillars of an uncheatable assessment are originality, personal connection, and purpose. Originality means that the learning artifact the students create is unique and original and has never been created before. It couldn't be created by anyone else. So a lot of times when you think about catching kids at cheating, you give them a worksheet and they just copy the answer from their friends, or you give them an essay prompt or a report and they copy the answer or have their friends help them write it. And so this idea of inviting students and being okay with how to grade a one of a kind artifact. So for example, you might, assign a student a research project for their science lab. And every student is going to learn how to conduct a science experiment. They know how to use the tools in the lab. But as a result, instead of just writing a lab report, they have to generate, let's say, an infographic or a social media story series to educate an audience beyond the classroom, right? And in making decisions about what that's going to look like and which aspects they are going to cover, you ultimately end up with an original piece, an original story or set of graphics and information that no other student in the class has done. And you can literally see, compare them side by side. This one is distinct from that one. And so that's what I mean by original.
What about personal connection? That struck me because, I'm thinking back to my days taking tests and quizzes. I'm thinking, why does it have to be personal? You're asking me to, test questions or essay questions about a book I read or about algebra one or something like that. What does personal connection even mean or have to do with all this?
It means how they approach the content, how they access it. It means how they apply it. What are they going to do with it in their own unique way? And how does our curriculum make connections to their personal lives or their community? Right. So, many teachers are doing a great job of this. Like a science teacher might do an experiment or a field work where they're out into the field of their specific community and seeing how these concepts apply to what's going on in that estuary or in that street. So there's a way to make some kind of personal connection there. There's also a piece that's really important, which is agency. And that means giving students ownership and responsibility for the work in multiple steps throughout this process. It doesn't mean students can do whatever they want. It just means that you set up the sandbox and the limits and the rules and the expectations. And then within there, the students have flexibility in the decisions they're going to make and how they're going to express that. So many times in our professional and in our academic lives, we're like, why am I doing this? What's the point? How does this matter to me? All the time. Students are always asking that question, either out loud or in their heads, for every assignment that you give them. And so what we're just saying here is like, you still are covering the same rigorous curriculum, but you're giving students opportunities to connect to their community, right? And to have ownership and responsibility. We used to call it choice and voice. I prefer ownership and responsibility because I think there's a responsibility that everyone has when you create content and to express that with fidelity and with integrity.
People are rightly concerned about AI and cheating, but I'm wondering if you think that maybe there is an unintended upside to this or silver lining, which is that the advent of AI has prompted teachers and educators to reassess their assessments and assignments and kind of take it to the next level, make them even more meaningful, like you've been talking about so passionately here. Do you think that's the case?
I think AI is a gift because it's reminded us of what really matters most in education. Again, sort of identified and laid bare the challenges and the problems with the education system before COVID, before AI, before screens. There were patterns that were already there that we were just sort of ignoring. And I think everyone bears some responsibility for this, right? Parents bear responsibility in wanting school to be a certain way because they're concerned about their kids getting into college. They're concerned about like, where am I going to buy a house because I want to be in the best school district? And what's the metric for a good school? It's test scores, nothing else, right? And so the test scores are driving that from the parent. Teachers have sort of inertia about what it means to teach and to learn because we're used to the way that we taught. Administrators are under pressure from all sides and limited resources even more now, even scarcer resources these days, about flexibility and trying something new. I think everyone's afraid to try something new, but really what I'm not saying is to do something new. I'm saying go back to the basics of what good teaching and learning is really about. And when I say go back to the basics, it's not paper and pencil and blue books, right? That's inequitable, right? And unsustainable. What I mean, go back to the basics is inquiry, wonder, passion, hard work, absolutely. And knowing that this hard work pays off and there's a point to this. So I think we should stop for a second, just pause and zoom out. What is the point of school in the first place? The point of school is not to get better at school. The point of school is to develop productive citizens in a democratic society. What are the skills and the mindsets we need of our students to be informed voters and to make good ethical decisions and to manage ambiguity and change when something new comes, right? The only place they're going to learn those skills and develop and strengthen those mindsets is in school. Because in the end, I want my students to be intellectually agile and emotionally resilient humans and to be able to solve problems when there's no grade on the line and no one is looking.
Michael, thanks so much for joining us in the podcast today.
Well, thanks so much. It's been really great speaking with you.
You'll find Michael's story and a link to the Cheat Vulnerability Index in our show notes. Michael's tool works because it catches the problem on the page before the assignment ever goes home. Our next guest says districts need that same foresight, pointed at the invoice instead of the assignment. Aniefuna is a public health and behavioral sciences researcher at EdSurge. His latest piece follows the AI trail past the classroom and into the data centers that power it, and the costs that show up on a budget long after the contract gets signed. Most conversations about AI in schools start in the classroom, how teachers use it, how students engage with it. But before districts redesign teaching and learning around AI, there's a bigger question to ask. Can they actually afford it? Aniefuna is a public health and behavioral sciences researcher with EdSurge. His latest piece for EdSurge skips past the chatbot and goes straight to the data centers behind it, because here's the shocking number. U.S. data centers pulled in about 176 terawatt hours of electricity in 2023. That's roughly 4.4% of all electricity used in the country. That's enough power to power almost 17 million American homes for a year. AI doesn't get cheaper as it scales. Every prompt costs something, which makes it incredibly difficult to budget for. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ira, thanks for having me.
So you compare today's AI systems to the old computer lab towers, except now the tower sits in a data center hundreds of miles away. Why does that distinction matter to a district that's never had to think about where its software actually lives?
Yeah, I think that this is a question that is going to be coming up a lot more in the next couple of years, probably in the next couple of months, now that a lot of local communities are mobilizing against data centers being built and rural lands being basically demolished, trees being knocked down in places where there was never intended to be any type of building or structures. A lot more people who typically wouldn't talk about energy are talking about energy and infrastructure, including myself. And to be honest, it really started with a paper notice on my door at my house. I live in a semi-rural area of Georgia. We're from New Jersey, my wife and I, and we bought our first house in Georgia, trying to escape from the pollution and the stink. And so when we came down here, everyone's like, "Why'd you guys move to this place?" And we're like, "For the oxygen, for the green, for the trees." And then one day we came home from a vacation and we had a paper notice on our door that said that our water was turned off and we had a boil water advisory. And this kind of sent us spiraling because we were like, I'm from in the inner city in New Jersey. I've experienced this growing up. I'm like, I thought I got out of that. So we were kind of freaking out. We have three little ones, and we were like, so what are we going to do? So I knew a little bit about data centers a few years ago when I was watching CNBC Money, and they were talking about the next biggest real estate investment. And there was starting to be some investigative journalism around it, around data centers. But this is the mobilization in my community has been super loud, and it's been a lot bigger than any polarized political issue in the last 8 years. That so many people across party lines in my neighborhood have been like, no, we don't want this here. We want to protect our greenery. We want deer. We want the coyotes, even though they scare the crap out of us. We want all these things because we know that biodiversity is important. And so data centers are no longer hundreds of miles away.
You point out in your article that generative AI runs on something called inference costs, meaning the bill grows every time someone uses it. What happens when a district decides to adopt AI at scale and then the cost exceeds their budget?
That's a mystery. What will happen? We don't know. Are they going to be hit with a bill like that company recently was, who used all of their Anthropic tokens within a month and racked up a $550 million bill? I can't imagine a school having that experience. Nevertheless, I can't imagine a school using AI as much as that company did, especially if they're utilizing it for software development or content creation. I can't imagine a school having the same use case. But if schools' procurement officers are not well informed about the change of AI companies going from these seat licenses to tokens, then they will most definitely rack up bills, because right now a lot of the AI usage in schools is kind of like trial. See what this does. Let's figure out how to use this in class. Can we do something to make it fun? How can we have kids utilize this and look at it critically? So a lot of the teaching with generative AI chatbots, to be honest, is not necessary. It is something where we're trying to teach kids how to use it so that they can possibly compete for a future world that they might have to utilize or create AI products. So while I think that is a noble cause and we should be preparing kids for their future, we don't know what that future is going to look like. If we're solely looking at generative AI chatbots as the thing to revolutionize education, then we're kind of putting our kids at a deficit. We're actually being counterproductive, because generative AI is not going to look the same when my 5-year-old is 18 and she's a freshman in college. I think that at some point, some AI companies are going to have education plans where they don't charge per token, or they have something for nonprofits where they are offering at a discount or in kind. Maybe. But right now, the AI companies who are leading the way, who recently filed for IPOs, they're running at a deficit financially in their companies. So I don't know when that philanthropic giving will start or end.
You also bring up in your article data privacy. And districts that don't want student data going to commercial AI systems, they can build their own private or locally hosted models. But of course, that adds real cost. Do you have any advice for schools evaluating that trade-off?
The question has to start at what are we using this for? What is the cost benefit analysis? Are kids going to be at a deficit if we don't integrate generative AI chatbots into what we do for teaching and learning? Are there other types of AI, artificial intelligence, like predictive models that might be helpful? For example, utilizing predictive AI or operational AI for things like scheduling, school bus schedules, or administrative tasks and responsibilities, things that will help districts before they start to create a budget for the AI product. I think just need to do a deep dive and some soul searching and figure out what do we actually need it for. I mean, I think that the organizations within the education ecosystem, the philanthropic organizations, the associations like ISTE can be really helpful in creating some critical dialogue around, okay, let's level set before we move fast and break schools, break their budgets. What do we actually need to use this for? And is the altruistic idea of kids needing to be prepared for the future, does it actually hold? Does that idea hold with this particular type of generative AI chatbot?
Yeah, and all this is landing right as ESSER funding has expired and districts are already stretched thin. So, is there any one question you'd want a district leader or administrator to ask before they sign an AI contract this year?
If I was a procurement officer in a district, or if I was advising a district, would be, what does it cost now? How much are we using? And customer success person at this EdTech product, how much is it going to cost next year? Because before we completely redesign our curriculum, our programs, our pedagogy around this, and maybe a complete redesign or overhaul is a bit dramatic, and maybe not all our schools are doing that, but maybe the conversation is that. Before we do that, can we actually afford it?
So, in fact, you and EdSurge have done some research on AI usage in the classroom. Can you walk us through your data and what you found?
Yes. So we talked to a small group of teachers all over the world, and it was interesting in the beginning because the sentiment was very mixed, but initially there seemed to be some fatigue around the conversation about AI in the classroom. And we started this project in the fall of 2024. We followed these teachers for quite a while as they created some lesson plans utilizing AI, and also teaching the students about AI and having their students to think critically about it from third grade all the way up to 12th grade. Ultimately, what we found, and what several other research organizations and some recent peer reviewed studies have found, is that the use case for generative AI in classrooms, is the verdict is still out. We don't fully know if it's as helpful as the urgency seems. But one of the things that we suggest in one of our reports from this study is that we have to look at the skills that will ultimately outlast the tools. So we're teaching the tools. So we're teaching the chatbots and the prompt engineering, that we're teaching to the tech, just like teaching to the tests, like the state tests. So when we already know, research has already told us that when we teach to the test, learning is not as sticky as it could be. So one of the skills that will likely outlast the tools, that has outlasted tools, is computational thinking. And so I have always been, as a researcher, I've been a big proponent of computational thinking. It just helped me personally. And then when I started to learn the learning science behind computational thinking and how much research there is around it, then I started to really get behind the concept as something that is a little bit more durable than teaching to the tech. Computational thinking is a way to solve problems. It was born in the computer sciences and more analytical disciplines, but ultimately the concept, it encourages students or learners to break down problems into smaller pieces. And then the next part of computational thinking is to recognize patterns. So when you start to see patterns and loops, if you will, then you can predict what will come next. And then the next component is designing step-by-step processes. And then the last part of computational thinking is to evaluate the outputs within an automated system. So that's where we have creating algorithms, creating code, doing computer programming. And so when we teach students how to think computationally and break down problems, you can take those skills and apply them to ultimately any problem that you experience. So instead of teaching prompt engineering, teaching computational thinking might be a little bit better or more effective learning tool that will last from third grade all the way up to college and when you do get into the workplace. Because generative AI chatbots might not look the same when my daughter is working and when she's 21 versus what they look like now. So computational thinking has been something that one of our findings from that research project that we think is probably a better focus.
So I guess it turns out there's no such thing as a free prompt. My thanks for this talk today.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time.
And we'll link to Mai's piece in the show notes. Michael found the fix by looking at the assignment before a student ever touches AI. Mai found the fix by looking at the budget before a district ever signs a contract. Don't wait for the AI to show you the problem. Look for it first. Before we go, if you want more stories like these, head to edsurge.com/newsletters and sign up. It's the best way to keep up with what EdSurge covers every week. That's it for this week with EdSurge. Thanks to Michael Hernandez and Mai Aniefuna for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. For the EdSurge team, I'm Ira Apfel. We'll be back in your feed next week.